Good afternoon, my bookworms and flyleafs. Welcome to this Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly, and as you all know, before we jump into things today, we do have a couple of things to go over. First, like, subscribe, and today we're floating the bell. We're floating the bell because we do something new to the bell every show, and the reason we're floating the bell is because today's show's sponsor, who I would like to give a shout out to here, is Longship Luxury Goods. And Longship Luxury Goods is run by Lady Eddie. They are Tacoma based and they have the accessories that you need for your Viking persona. It is true, I have literally been to see their stuff myself. Belts, pouches, clothing, Viking long coats, mugs, cups, fantasy, and historically inspired clothing lines. So they always have free shipping with the magic word imagine. So if you order from their website, use the magic word imagine and, drop them a note, let them know where you heard about them from. Please check them out. It's Longship Luxury Goods. Thank you so much for being the sponsor of our show today. So with that said, I have one more thing just to inform you guys of, because it is April 16th. Fae Productions is doing a Beltane, Boffers, and tea. Not those two things together because they don't go together very well. But on May 1st and 2nd, which is the first weekend of May, on Friday, we will be gathering at the Monarch Sculpture Park in Olympia, and we will be having some Boffery goodness as well as some LARPy goodness mixed in there with plot and other such things. And then on Sunday, we will be down at the Shire in Chehalis for our high tea. And keep an eye on our Instagram because I'm going to start posting some sneak peeks of the food that is going to be at the high tea. I'm so amazed and impressed, and we're finally in the last stages of finalizing our menu. So it should be a pretty good weekend, and it is free for everybody to attend both things. If you are a Patreon patron at the trooping level or higher, then you will get a bonus VIP pack at the high tea. But anybody is welcome to come until we meet capacity. So it is first come, first serve. We are not there yet. We have about 10 spots left. So everybody, welcome, please, if you will. Today's author, it's Marie, not Mary. Oh, you're on mute. Let's see. Can I unmute you? Nope. There you are.
I'm getting like a double soundtrack here, but yeah, it's Marie.
Okay, very good. Well, Marie, if you will, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us who you are and what you write. Maybe am I coming out your computer? Can you mute the sound coming out of your computer? Do you have this show running?
I don't know. It's like I hope not. There is that's better. No, I can hear you. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I had it. Sorry.
I have done the same thing.
This is much better.
Yay. Okay. So please, if you will, introduce yourself to our audience and tell us who you are, what you write.
Okay. Well, I'm an author from Regina, Saskatchewan, which is Treaty 4 territory and the home of the Métis, homeland of the Métis. And I write a lot of children's books. I have 40 published children's books, and I also have a bunch of short stories and poetry published in literary magazines and things like that. And I have my 2 young adult novels, The Last of the Gifted, Spirit Sight, and Water Sight. And basically, children's and young adult books is in terms of novels and books.
And this one that you're going to be reading to us today, which is the young adult, is going to be, I assume, a series that has more, since it seems like we're going with the elements here. Well,
yeah, I'm not sure, honestly. I was writing book 3, and I think maybe it's actually going to be a related series. So this might be a duology, and then a related series coming after.
I'm not familiar with the term duology. What is
that term? Well, it's a new one for me too. I didn't realize you could do that, but this, like the two books together, kind of take you to a good place, in terms of the storyline. So rather than adding another sequel to that, so to speak, this might be a bit of a spin-off now. and I'll continue on in the same era. It's 1282 Wales is the setting of the books. So it's fantasy set in historic Wales, like medieval Wales, with the events that went on in 1282, 1283. Wales was invaded by the English, the Edward I, the fierce and invading army of Edward I that took over Wales and basically ended Welsh independence. So I've set the series there, but the characters have magical powers. So people in Wales didn't really have magical powers.
Now, what caused you to choose Wales as the setting, out of curiosity?
It's my grandfather is from Wales, and he was a Welsh speaker. So actually, I began to get interested in this, information in this series when I visited Wales myself. I just wanted to go. I'm a journalist too, right? So I was actually looking at trying to become a travel writer and make some money, right? And so I set up a trip to Wales because my grandfather was from there, and I'd always been kind of obsessed with him because all of my grandparents were dead when I was born, right? They had already died by the time I was born. So I'm one of the only ones in my family who never got to meet them because I'm the youngest, right? And so there was always these stories floating around, and my dad was a good storyteller, and he would tell me things about Wales and so on. My dad died young. So anyway, I just decided I would go. That would be the first place I went kind of, to explore as a travel writer. And instead of writing travel articles about it, I ended up getting involved in writing fantasy about it, I am I like speculative writing, so I do tend to that direction with fiction.
So speaking of Wales, now one of the things that you had said in our email exchange prior to the show was that you had mentions of Welsh fairies in the book.
Yes, the Tylwyth Teg. Which is fairies in Welsh. Yes.
I was going to say, since you said he was a Welsh speaker, I was like, oh, I bet you actually know how to pronounce that properly.
Well, I don't, because nobody, the reason I guess that I was so obsessed with him is because nobody really knew anything about him. So I could kind of make him up, and for a long time when I was younger, I thought of him as he could have been a criminal. And that's why, I just had all these fantastical stories in my head about who he might have been. But the one thing I did know, was that he was a Welsh speaker. And when I started looking genealogy-wise, I found out that he listed himself as a Welsh speaker. Not very many people prior to 1990 would have admitted that they spoke Welsh. It was an outlawed language as of this war, 1282, 1283.
In 1990, it was outlawed?
In 1990, it was brought back again. They were allowed to speak their own language. And so right now, 800 years later, right? They finally said, okay, you can speak Welsh. And not only can they speak it, but they brought it back whole hog into, if you go to school, if your kids go to school in Wales, they're going to school in Welsh. If you're looking at the signs on the road, they're in Welsh first. English is the little letters underneath, right? If you want to work in Wales, you should speak Welsh because, you can't get a government job unless you do, right? So it's a little bit like Quebec and Canada where they're very pro-French, and everything goes on in French. Well, in Wales right now, that's what it's like. So that was a bit of a shock, coming back, going to Wales for the first time and realizing that there was Welsh everywhere. Having thought, I guess I sort of bought into the idea that Wales was just a part of England. That's what most people think, right? And then I found out all this history when I was there, and it was kind of a shock. And it kind of drew me in at the same time. And it kind of felt like, a lot of things were the things that I knew about the First Nations here and the, racism and the things that had been done, preventing them from speaking their own language. There's a place in Regina, which is the exhibition grounds, and the road allowance people, the Métis and the First Nations people who came to Regina prior to 1960 or so, to trade or to do anything were forced to stay there. They had to stay in the exhibition grounds area. They weren't allowed into the town after such and such a time of the evening, and that happened in Wales after 1283. So it was like I looked at that and I went, weird. This is just really strange, to think that these things went on here, and so they were like refugees in their own land in a sense, right? So, and then I got this different perspective on my grandfather, who was this guy who in 1916 listed himself as a Welsh first speaker. And that's actually kind of a militant, not maybe bold. Yes, at least it's bold, right? I was going to say militant, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I really don't know much about him. So I shouldn't be making stories up still. But you know what I mean? So I thought, well, that's interesting. So I actually went and took a Welsh class. And so I speak kindergarten Welsh. I can say cheers. Like and best wishes and things like Dominia de Gaure, right? I can say things like that, but it doesn't. I can't really say a whole sentence in Welsh if I just think of it off my head. I can probably read it, but.
Oh man.
So, anyway, but I'm learning. I'm learning.
The crazy part though, it's there's so many consonants.
Yeah.
And not enough vowels.
Well, and we're putting the books into audiobook right now. And I deliberately put some Welsh in here, and people would say, why don't you just I was struggling with the history because there's, at the time they lost the war, and the history isn't written by the winners or by the losers. It's written by the winners. So all of the things, there was a real attempt on Edward's part to destroy the history of the Aberfraw, the House of Aberfraw, and the basically the Welsh that were at that time. He went to some considerable lengths to do that, including burning a lot of documents. So there really isn't a lot known, and there's more known now, as time has gone by from, as I've been writing these books for many, many years, things keep getting added in because there's some scholarship going on right now that's adding to the research of it, right? But so I'm struggling with this, and people would say to me, why don't you just set it in a world with 3 moons and have done with it, and they can make it up. You can do whatever you want, because I was struggling to get it right, or to get it as accurate as I could. I was interested in doing that. That was more important to me, I guess, than creating a fantasy setting. I wanted the setting to be as real as I could get it, so that the magic, which is Welsh magic that I'm trying to deal with in the books, becomes more, believable or whatever. I wanted it to sink into the world where it actually is from, right?
Right.
And that was important to me. So that's the lengths that I went to do it. I actually hired a historical reviewer, person who has got expertise in that, in medieval, to some extent in medieval Wales, to help me with that. Daniel Sobilski, who is from Ottawa, actually in Canada.
Shout out.
Yeah. And anyway, so, and I've gone to pretty great lengths to make it as accurate as I can, and at the same time fantasy, because I want to go out of genre. I don't want to be confused. I don't want people to think of it as history necessarily, but I did want it to have that sort of very authentic and realistic ring, because this is a world that's lost. This is a world that disappeared, and there's no getting it back, especially because it was deliberately erased.
We were literally talking about this briefly yesterday on our Discord. We were talking about the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and I said that's the movie Agora, where they burn the library, because it burned 3 times, got burned down 3 times. And I was like, I cried in that movie when the library burned. That's where my sentiment lies. I was like, it's so terrible. Look at everything being lost. And but they used to do that back then as a way of also of punishing their enemies, because to erase somebody's name, any record of them, all of their household, all of their lineage, it was a way to secure that they weren't going to come after you again, or that their children weren't going to grow up and then try to, take back what was taken from them. So they would just sort of wipe out everybody and then try to erase them entirely. And
which is very much the history of this time period in Wales and the House of Aberfraw. So I really wanted to use that, and kind of I wanted that to be part of what these 2 characters of mine are going through, even though they're not royal. They're servants, I guess, they're noble servants, of the Welsh house. So.
Well, this sounds all right, and I'm sorry, we apparently have trolls out there in the chat, so I will look to take care of that here in a second. But we have here, that's only on Twitch, by the way, so I don't know if you can see Twitch. I'm sorry that we have Twitch trolls. Today you are going to be reading to us from 2 books. Can you give us a little bit, tell us a little bit about book number 1, and then we can get ready to roll into that if you're ready for it.
Okay, I was going to just read from Watersight, but I can tell you a bit about Spirit Sight.
Oh, okay.
Basically, okay, so I've said it's set in 1282 Wales, and it's about 2 siblings who pledge their magical abilities to protect their people from the invading English army, with a little help from the last true Prince of Wales after his murder. Hugh is a warrior in training with a special ability to control the minds of birds and animals. And his sister Catherine can see the future in a drop of water, basically. And in Spirit Sight, Hugh uses his gifts to spy for the last true Prince of Wales. And when the prince is ruthlessly murdered, his spirit melds with Hugh's. So it's basically guiding them to fight back against the English. And his sister is trying to use her gifts to save the royal children and convince her betrothed to help her do that. And then Hugh and Kat have to join forces and stretch their gifts, essentially, to help their people escape from the invaders. And then Watersight carries on with that into 1283. Sorry, these are all my flags where I'm going to read. So Catherine,
that's very organized, actually.
I told you I practiced today. Anyway, Catherine, her gift is basically, she's the most important character, I think, or the character that drives Watersight. Her gift is the only hope of finding 3 relics that are thought to be able to rally the Welsh people. But she has to outwit the English lord who wants to use her gifts to capture the would-be prince, the Llewellyn's brother, David, right? And Hugh is on the run with David and the dwindling Welsh army, and they're constantly being betrayed as they go. And Hugh is taking refuge more and more in his gift and the evolution of his gift as it goes through this book. And finally, with her brother trapped in his magic and her betrothed in an English prison, Kat faces a kind of an impossible choice: save her brother or save the one she loves, you know. So that's the story of Watersight.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. I think a fire engine just pulled up outside, and I can literally hear it running. So, yeah, I don't know what's happening with that, but I cannot get up to close my back door. So I'm kind of keeping myself on mute here because there's a bunch of noise things going on out there that I don't want to have interrupt. With that, though, here's how the rest of this will go for those of you out there. I'm about to turn the entire screen over to Marie so that she can read to us from the book. While she's doing that, I will be on mute and in the comment section of the chat so I can talk back and forth with you guys and take questions for her. And when she's done reading, then we will pose the questions to her. And at the end of the show, we will do the drawing for the giveaway.
Sure. Did you want to play the play the video?
I will do that right now. Well,
all right.
Here we go. Let's see. Uh-oh, where did I put it? I have it right here. There we go. Okay. And audio. And great.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to read first just 3 sections of the book. I'm going to start with the beginning of chapter 1. Merioneth, North Wales, April 1283. Mist circled the mountain like a massive fist. Squinting upward, Cat could barely make out the legendary giant's seat near the top of Ceder Idris. The fog surrounded her, obscuring Greece, who climbed behind her, but she drew it around her like a cloak. They needed stealth. Below them, the valley was full of English mercenaries hunting for Welsh heads. It didn't matter that only a handful of warriors remained. Women, children, any of them would satisfy the wretched king. Not much further, Rhys murmured. She hadn't had a vision since they'd fled Bere Castle, not when she stared into the rain that morning, not through her reflection in the stream they crossed earlier, not even in the waterfall when she cupped her hands in it to drink. With the English soldiers camped near the lake, Rhys had agreed to show her a stream farther up the mountain so she could try again. Her foot dislodged a chunk of slate. It clinked down the side of the mountain, disturbing the mist blanket as it went. Her breath caught. She glanced back toward the gully where they had left the others. Rhys loomed behind her out of the mist. His features held the usual stoic calmness, but the heat radiating from him made her wonder if the anger still boiled inside him at the loss of his castle. He had given it up to save them, his people, her. You are the Morrigan, he said. If you see naught, it may be there is naught to see. She tried to smile at his wordplay. I'm no legend, she muttered, but he only raised his eyebrows. He thought of her as a wise woman, like his Irish nurse, whose gift of foretelling could predict and even prevent their doom. But Cat was Welsh. Her gift came as it chose. She forced herself to breathe out slowly. For his sake, she would find a way to will it to herself. She reached for the rocks and climbed, one step, then another, feeling her way with hands and feet as she went. She had tucked away her pretty leather-soled shoes so she wouldn't slip on the smooth slate. Her feet were used to their freedom, but the jagged edges caught at her toes, and her calves ached from 2 days of hiding and backtracking on a route that should have taken them 1. There, he said, as their feet finally found the firmer ground of a small plateau. They could hear the roar of the stream. She drew a long breath and tried to smile again. He took her hand and led her to a large tree, pulling her forward to stand beside him. The mist had cleared a little, and she could see a fork in the rocky streambed. Look there. He gestured toward the ledge where the rushing water parted. Those stones will hold you. She stepped onto a large flat stone and crouched down. The rocks slowed the water enough that her pale, somber face stared back, waving in the ripples. She must see what was facing them. She chose a calm spot near an eddy and fought to remember the songs to call her gift. She could hear her uncle's voice in her memory as she stared fixedly at the liquid, whispering the words, not daring to sing aloud. Nothing stirred. Cat rubbed her forehead with one hand and sat back on her heels. His hand rested on her shoulder, warm and supportive even through the fabric of her cloak. The first thing we must do is get our people to safety. Focus on that now, Cat. Of course, he would say that. He was raised to be their leader, and he always put his people's welfare before his own. Cat longed to help him more than anything else, if only her gift would cooperate. A water beetle skimmed across the clear surface of the stream. She followed its path, staring at the ripples it made when her surroundings began to dissolve. And she could feel thudding all around her, hooves pounding toward her on the flat dirt. She shrank back into the dark stone of the abbey walls, sheltered in its shadow. Familiar voices screamed and cried out somewhere nearby. Rhys drew his longsword from its sheath and sprinted toward the riders. He swung around as the first horseman flew at him and lunged upward toward the armored man. Cat saw the man flinch as Rhys thrust. The bite of steel tore open the knight's throat. The horse screamed as it careened past Rhys. He whirled, but the second horseman was already bearing down on him. Rhys threw his sword, and the force carried the knight off his horse. Then the third was upon him. Rhys leapt again, his arms outstretched as if to drag the man from his saddle. The knight's sword flashed as dust and churning hooves covered the scene. Then the horses passed. The dust cleared. She saw a crumpled form on the grass. And Kat was crouching by the stream again. No! She twisted up and threw her arms around him, unable to speak. What? He asked her, holding her tightly. What did you see? She stared at Rhys. The violence of the vision stopped her voice. How could she tell him? She had clearly felt the Abbey all around her. The Abbey would offer the people shelter, food, shelter, rest, what they all needed. And it was the place they must go to collect the relics. But if they went, it would end his life. Tell me, he said. She drew away from him. Prince David, the man who would be Prince of Wales, had sent Rhys on this errand. The House of Aberfraw would fall, and all of free Wales with it, if David could not rally the people to him as his brother had. Many said the relics had helped Prince Llewellyn keep the people on his side. The cross of Neath that marked him as their leader in the eyes of the church, the crown of Arthur that marked his true heritage, and the coronet of Wales given by the English king to mark Llewellyn as the Prince of Wales in the eyes of the world. Now these relics would gain David the support he needed for a final stand against the English, and it was up to Rhys to get the relics to him. Tell me what you saw, he said. Kat's heart thumped. We must not go, she said. You must not go. And she told him all of it. He listened, his blue eyes intent on hers, drawing the words from her. When she was done, he said nothing for a moment, a muscle flinching once in his jaw, belying his calm. And the people, he said, were they safe? She heard their voices screaming again and slowly shook her head. His face fell for a moment, so fleeting she wondered if she'd imagined it, before he regained the stoicism she had come to expect from him. Always in the past, her visions had held hope, a way to change the fate that would surely bring them defeat. But there were so few Welsh warriors left now, and the enemy had so many. How could she change this vision? So I'm going to leave that there for now and take you to the second character, Hugh. This is the beginning of chapter 2. Hugh circled over the treetops surrounding the silent tower of Dol Badarn Castle. Catching a wind current, he rose effortlessly to the top of the mottled slate and rubble stronghold, rising some 80 feet above the eastern tip of the lake. The ever-present rain clouds parted to let the mid-morning sun peek through for a moment. He drifted downward, barely moving the tips of his long red wing feathers. Training his sharp eyes on the castle courtyard far below, he saw the glint of steel, sun on steel. Saison, English, knights in armor, and with them the soldiers of King Edward's army. Flying lower, he trained his eyes on a man walking the castle's defensive inner wall. The lone soldier paced the length of the wall and back, staring at the countryside around him. His posture was slack and his footfalls heavy, not like one weary and at war, but more like one lost in dreams of his faraway home in England. Good. The hawk part of Hugh saw the enemy as fat and complacent, ready for plucking. The other part, the human part, recalled his father and the other Welsh warriors, waiting for word of what he could discover at Dol Badarn. Wait, he told himself, there must be more to see. He flew to the west tower, spotting 2 soldiers inside playing at dice. Better. These men expected no trouble from the remains of the Welsh army. Hugh folded his wings and perched on the tower, staring down at the English practicing in the castle yard. 6 men. A small stack of armor leaned against one wall. The castle barn stood open and empty of horses. The knights and soldiers must have left the castle. A few sorry-looking cows milled about near the barn. The animals were too large to interest the hawk, but the human part of him salivated. A cow, even as thin as these, would have been more than welcome to Prince David's handful of warriors with their wives and children, now refugees in their own land. Hugh soared off again, past the main entry, alert and watchful. He spied the portcullis, open for the return of troops that would be searching for Prince David and their company. New wood on the entryway told him it had been rebuilt during the months since Dol Badarn had been taken. It held a barbican, like the kind he'd seen in Shrewsbury, an elaborate maze of gates for defense. The English had already been busy. Further inside the courtyard, he noted the wooden stairs still attached to the second-floor entrance of the tall, round tower. The English had made no attempt to secure the inner courtyard, no doubt trusting the portcullis, which could be lowered in one blow by the lone guard walking the hoarding to defend the castle. Hugh rounded the corner, still scanning the ground, and flew into a wall of black and gray feathers behind the castle. Crows and jackdaws wheeled like a dark, writhing blotch against the sky. The ravening birds circled, ducked, and dived at each other and at him. Hugh flew past them a little and then turned back to follow. The birds squabbled and flew, and he glided behind, letting instinct guide him. And then he saw it, a mound of burned and decaying bodies. The castle's former inhabitants. The English had thrown Welsh bodies into a pile to burn them instead of burying them. But the deed was only half finished, and the birds and animals had done the rest. He could taste the acrid stench all around him. Wings spread, Hugh hung suspended in the air. The world stood still. Barbaric. He heard the voice in the back of his mind. It was the prince. Hugh closed his eyes to see the former Prince of Wales inside his mind. Llewellyn appeared to stand with arms crossed, as he had so often in the royal court of Gareth-Gallen. When the prince had been murdered on a hill near Kilmary, Hugh had saved Llewellyn's spirit from oblivion by taking it within himself. But Prince Llewellyn should be sleeping inside him now. Instead, Llewellyn stared back at him, his eyes full of grief. Grief that changed to concern. Steady, lad. The feathers of his long wings poked Hugh like 1,000 quills into his flesh. No, his eyes flew open and he tried to fight the change that would leave them both plummeting toward the hard earth far below. No, he spread his wings wide and tried to push against the air currents, but he felt himself falter. No, he shuddered once and tried to take charge of his wings again. The prince, his sister, Cat, his family, they were counting on him. He must get back to give them news of what he had found at Dolbadarn. For Cymru, he thought desperately, but it was too late. Looking down, he saw long, pale feet where his talons should be. With a grinding crunch, his bones twisted and reshaped. The hawk's shriek became his own scream as he plummeted into the mass grave. The jackdaws screeched and pecked at him as he fell, a foreigner in their world of wind and sky. Instinctively, Hugh bent his knees and raised his arms to protect his head, turning away from the birds. He took the impact on his side, sinking deep into the gore of decay. Something bumped at his back, and he turned to find a hand reaching for him, white fingers curling as if beckoning him to hell. He swooshed it away in a thick wave of viscous gore that returned and clung to him. It splashed at his body, filling his nostrils with the stench of death. The tepid pool of dead flesh and blood and bone shocked him back to earth. He gagged on the smell of burnt hair and rot, even as he tore his way through it. He thrashed and clawed at the blackened bodies that blocked his way. Everywhere he turned, there were more. He wanted to scream, but he could not find his voice. Get us out of here, boy. Hugh's hands felt something solid, and he clutched at it, pulling himself forward. He ripped at a pile in front of him, and it gave way in tattered clothing and bone. Finally, he heaved himself out, cleared the gore, and ran from it. He saw the trees at the edge of the forest and ran toward them until he stumbled over a tree root and lay there, retching and shuddering. So I'm going to leave Hugh there in some jeopardy, and I'm going to move forward. So let's catch up with Katrin now. Her vision of Rhys's death convinces her to go alone to the abbey to try and find the relics where they're hidden. But of course, Rhys follows her, and they begin talking to the abbot, and they hear a noise in the courtyard. And of course, Rhys tears out of the room, and she follows. So I'll pick it up at chapter 5. Cat ran as far as the abbey courtyard before her fear rooted her. The riders careened toward Rhys, but he stepped forward, as he had in her vision. He held his sword drawn and at the ready. She could see the vision again in her mind's eye. Rhys cutting down the first rider, fending off the second, and then, no, she could not let it happen. She must change the outcome. The jeweled throwing knives Rhys had given her were stowed in the sheath strapped to her calf. She rustled her skirts and withdrew 2 of the knives. She held them lightly, flipping the first to hold the tip between her index finger and thumb. It was almost over before she had time to set her throw. She heard the scrape of Rhys's sword and the thunder of the horse's hooves. When the first horse screamed, she forced her mind back to the scene. Rhys whirled, but the second horseman was nearly on him. Where had she seen the third rider? Her hand flew forward and released the knife. The man came into view, and he jerked in the saddle. She saw the spurt of red blood. Had her knife struck home? For endless seconds, Kat could not move her eyes from the Englishman reeling in the saddle. Her hand came up to her throat, but her mind blanked. His sword clattered to the ground, and he fell out of sight behind the horse. Rhys took up the fallen English sword as he rushed past to engage 2 other men on horseback. The English were everywhere. The younger monks had thrown their reserve to the wind and were doing their best to fight, even as the abbot called out for peace. The world reeled around her. Had she really hit the English knight? She felt the answer in her gut and almost doubled over. Then Gawain seized her by the arm, pulling her into the abbey. Rhys, she said, unable to finish. Had she saved Rhys, or was it all for naught? She struggled to get away from Gawain, but he held her fast. He will join us. Gawain rushed her into the darkness of the abbey nave. He balanced a pack under his other arm. We must secure the relics. And I'll leave it there for now. So that's the beginning of
Okay. I'm coming back here. Oh, 1 second. Here we go. All right. So just from that book then.
That's right.
Okay. So the Spirit Sight, is that the second book then?
Spirit Sight is the first book. The book I read from was Water Sight.
Water Sight, which is the second book. Okay. Yeah. I just didn't have the order of them. Would you like to roll the trailer of the first book?
Sure.
I have them both right here, so we can, and then we can take some questions from the audience.
Sure.
All right. That sounds perfect. Let's go ahead and get to that. Give me just 1 second. That is what I want to go away, and I want to replace it with your information. All right. This is, here we go. We'll embiggen it here so it's taking up the whole screen. Oh, I forgot to push the sound button. We would like our audience to be able to hear the sound that is in the video. So let's try it again. There we go. And boom.
You're on mute.
All right. So I was saying those are, sorry. I was saying those are really awesome trailers, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks so, because we had some folks commenting as well. And speaking about trailers and questions from the audience, we'll just go right there with these trailers are so great. How did their creation come about?
Well, I'm in a group called the Creative Academy for Writers. And it's a kind of a networking group of writers who are, actually writing in a lot of different genres. But a friend of mine had a trailer made for her books are actually crime stories. Anyway, she had a book trailer, and I wanted a book trailer really badly because I love them, but I'm kind of stupid about anything pictorial.
But it's a big learning curve too.
It is, and it's kind of I love visual, but it's not. Doing it is another thing entirely, right? Anyway, she had recommended this fellow. It's actually someone from Fiverr who did the trailers. Yeah.
Nice.
So and aren't they great? Like
Yeah,
they're so great. I know. It's Ravinder. If anybody wants to, make a book for it. Ravinder is his name on Fiverr. Anyway.
Ravinder. You know that. Yeah. I feel like that name. No, I mean, probably
sure
not this person, but the name is making me think of something else. As like I've heard it, or I've known somebody with that name, or I don't know. That name sounds so familiar.
It might not be his real name. I mean, that's the way Fiverr works, right? But that's his like handle or whatever.
Right.
So, but he's great, and I'd highly recommend him. He's also very fast and mostly knew what I wanted. I explained what the books were about, and he kind of did them, and I was like, nice. Wow, this is great. This is sort of it, and like he made a couple of changes for me, and they were good to go. So yeah, I was really happy. Yeah, okay. Great guy.
So I put that in the comments for anybody, because any other authors that may want the same thing and be out there. So we do have a few questions here from the audience, and we'll take those questions. And then right before we take our last question is when we'll call for names to be submitted for the Wheel of Win for the drawing. So the first one, I want to kind of scroll back here a little bit. I know you mentioned this before, but for those who were late coming to the show, will there be more than 2 books that you have so far? And if you could just maybe tell us your answer to that again, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ensemble cast, right? So like there's Hugh and Kat and a lot of people that help them out through the way. And I do want to write more about them, because I don't feel like their story is finished yet. But I do feel like these 2 books kind of go together nicely. And what I'm being told is called a duology. So you can do 2 books, and then maybe do a related series that would be fleshing that story out more with some of the stories of the other characters. There's also some history to the relics that I want to get into as well. I don't want to say too much about it, because it would be a big spoiler for Watersight if you knew. But don't despair at the end of Watersight, because there is more to come about those relics and some interesting stuff that I really want to tell. I want to delve into. And also, Edward I is. Okay, so this Edward I.
Longshanks, is that who?
It's Longshanks, yes, the guy that they consider to be, what is it, the hammer of the Scots, right? Except that this is Wales 30 years before that. And so he's testing the waters, doing all kinds of things that are way worse than he did to the Scottish later, just to see how far he can go to completely subjugate a people. The Welsh were kind of fierce, and there had been a couple of 100 years of fighting going on between the English and the Welsh at this point. And Llewellyn had actually won a couple of times and gained a whole lot of ground, and then lost it again. And, so, but basically Edward I created 13 big stone castles all the way around Wales. So the castles that people think of as Welsh castles are not actually Welsh. They're actually English, and they were created to subjugate the Welsh, right? The Welsh castles, the castles of the Welsh princes, are pretty much in complete ruin. And some of them are mounds, and that's kind of like you go, that's where it was, right? There's nothing there anymore. Because Edward deliberately went around and leveled them. It's called a fleece, the royal court of Llewellyn the last, was actually Garth Kellen, and there is nothing left of it. There were 22 or 24 different royal courts around North Wales and Anglesey, and right now they can find evidence of 1. That's what a good job Edward did of destroying Wales. Yeah, so he really put his heart into it for the better part of 30 years, and completely demolished anything that could be Welsh resistance. Yeah. So, but at the same time, 800 years later, they come back full force, right, with the language and everything. So, and the stories in my family, I don't have any idea if these are true. These are family lore, okay? But the idea is that the Welsh are like the first guerrilla warfare, first guerrilla warriors, so to speak. That basically they hid in the mountains.
Didn't line up.
Attempted to keep everything, but they very much kept to themselves. So they're not as well known as the Irish or the Scottish in terms of the culture and all that, because they had to protect it, right? So in the mountains of North Wales, they were keeping their language and their culture alive in a very small way, a microcosm, right? In order to bring it, and we're able to successfully bring it back from the 1990s on. So it's gaining ground again, which is really kind of cool. And that's part of what got me interested in writing this, and part of why I wanted to write it.
Kind of keeping it alive there. So,
and yeah, so there's not, so like I say, don't despair at the end of Watersight, because there's more to come.
Okay, so Erwina Ocean Mist, what inspired your book front, the cover design? It's very eye appealing, and then hearing some of the first chapter inspires her to read both books very soon.
Yay! Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really love it that you said that. Isn't this a great cover?
They're both beautiful.
I know, like, this is the first one that, like, basically, the cover designer is Callum Jagger from the UK. And we kind of just told him what the books were all about. I don't think he even read them, although he read a pretty lengthy scenario of what the books were about. But he came up, like, and we did send him some visual images. This on Watersight, you can see the
sword,
sort of like the knife that cat,
the jeweled daggers.
Yeah,
yes,
the throwing daggers that Cat's using, and so he knew about those, and we had sent him some, pictures of daggers, trying to get something pretty, but relatively 12th century, which was a kind of a chore in itself. And this, where is it? This is the Lions of Gwynedd, which is the district of Wales where Llewellyn lived. He's got his own lions, but we decided we'd use this one because it was kind of more fun. It's taller and funner. Waving at you. Anyway, that's like, so like, and Llewellyn's name, of course, is lion, means lion. So, and that was kind of one of his symbols. Yeah, so that was kind of his symbol. And the other part of it is an eye, because of course sight, right? And so Callum just played around with this. I've been really lucky in terms of people understanding the visuals that I see in my own head somehow. And Callum was able to come up. This one has really not been changed since the beginning. There was another version of it, but it was, a no-brainer. This one had a black inside. This part was black instead of red. And so we put it up on Facebook and said, please help me choose which cover should I choose. And people chose the red one. So we went with the red one. It was lots of fun doing these covers. But I mean, the Welsh mountains are in the background. You can't see them probably in this image, but you can see this is Cadair Idris, which is, one of the areas that's in the book and so on. So it's like, yeah.
I like that they're consistent. Like, it's a consistent style of, because I guess that when you collect a series of books, it's nice to have them look consistent, be a consistent size, right?
Yeah.
So I find that very appealing.
Yeah. Well, and this, the person who was in charge of this was Jeannie Martinson, my publisher and editor of Wood Dragon, or pardon me. Yeah. My publisher from the little town of Mossbank, Saskatchewan. Anyway,
what a cute name. I like that name, Mossbank.
Yeah, and her publishing company is Wood Dragon Books. So I'm really happy with the way those covers turned out. They're very great.
So let's see here. We have a couple more. I have a question, and then we have a couple other questions as well. So I'll go with the audience first. Let's see. Well, so maybe I'll combine these two. So because they kind of are built on one another. One was, so my question was, how did you research historical Welsh magic and that you had used for the basis of the magic in your books? And that's kind of coupled with this other question we have here, which is, do you have any more stories of Welsh magic, whether or not they use the same characters?
Oh, yeah. Well,
kind of a double header there.
Good, very good questions too. There are quite a few old books written about the Welsh fairies and Welsh magic. You can find them on like Google Drive and places like that if you just kind of Google, long enough to find them. But also my grandfather apparently told a bunch of stories passed down to my father, who told them to me as bedtime stories. So I got some of them that way. And
that's cool.
Yeah, so and my sense of how the magic works kind of comes from my dad, because Welsh folktales and Welsh magic stories are a little bit weird. Like, they're not the magic. Well, bear in mind that, this is talking about, Gwyneth Nuth, the basically wild magic. He's the leader of the, Wild Hunt, if you've heard of that. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So we're talking about it. We're talking about a magic that doesn't really follow rules.
Right.
Or at least the rules are a lot looser and odder than you might think. They're not too logical, right?
Right.
So that's the kind of magic that I wanted to deal with. And I know I've been asked by people who do other forms of magic and have other pantheons of magic. How don't you need to consider conservation of mass, for example, when someone is changing from one shape to another? And no, you don't in Wales.
Yeah.
You don't have that restriction in Welsh magic. They can just basically go from this to that to the next thing. And in fact, the Welsh legends that I remember and that I have found to read again, just to make sure that my memory is correct. Basically, there's, for example, one story of a bard who was at a big festival, trying to vie for the king of the bards, I guess. And he was looking for a good story that hadn't been told already. And so he went out into the woods and he was looking around at the animals, trying to find something, that would make a good story. And he saw a hare, a rabbit, turn into a deer, turn into a hawk and fly through the air, and turn into a jackdaw, and then turn into a deer again, and then turn into a hare again. And that's the story that he ended up going back to tell. And of course he won the contest, right? So things like that, like
jackdaw.
A jackdaw is kind of like a crow with a funny head, a fluffy head.
Oh,
kind of like a crow raven kind of bird.
Okay, but Google is about to show me.
Yeah. It's kind of pretty, actually. They're kind of pretty, but they're definitely carrion type, crow type, COVID type birds. And yeah. So those are the kinds of stories that I had in my head and that I was kind of dealing with. And then I found a really cool old book of, in Welsh, fairy tales are sometimes mixed up with folklore too, and legends and things like that. And the Welsh people at this time period, Llewellyn, for example, Llewellyn the Last, actually could trace his history back to Troy. So they felt that they came from Brutus, who escaped from Troy at just before the horse came, I guess, that destroyed the city of Troy. Anyway, he got out and he made his way to England. And these are the Welsh consider themselves to be the Britons, the people of Brutus, right? So Llewellyn actually had a bard, and there were three kinds of bards in Welsh, the Welsh culture at that time, sort of like the master warrior bards. And then you had your bards who traveled, and they were considered to be a little risque, like traveling minstrels or whatever. And then there were the bards that were your household bards, and every royal house kind of, or group, whatever they are, they were, I shouldn't call them royal because it wasn't really about royalty. Like the word prince in Welsh actually means first citizen. It doesn't mean royal guy who's got blood or anything. Like it's like, you earn your place by how well you do and by how well you serve. So the idea was not that you were like leading the people as if you were above the people, but that you actually served the people better than others. And that's how you got your place, right? Okay. So like if you came to a Welsh household, they were the lord of the household and his lady were expected to serve you and wait till you finished eating before they ate. So you got the good stuff and they got the other. And that was very different from what was going on in the rest of Europe and basically the nobility and so on in England even. Interesting. But the English very much considered the Welsh to be savages because of things like that, right? So it was just they didn't understand that way of thinking. Sort of the hospitality principle, right? I mean, yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But yeah, all of those stories. So I tried to kind of use all of that as well in the lore. But the magic is all kind of mixed up with that, because you can imagine with 3 levels of bards, there would be a lot of storytelling going on, right? Yes. and some of the stories are nuts. Like there's King Arthur stories from the 9th century on, where King Arthur had knights that could do things like, you got to a stream and it was too big and running too fast for you to cross it. So he had a knight who could jump down and drink the stream so that you could go across, right? That's convenient. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to have magical people with you, let's make them useful, right? And there was another guy.
Like have a picture of a kid with a garden hose, like,
like he just,
That's awesome.
And they had also someone called Lip the Warrior, and his special power was that he could take his bottom lip and flip it over his head. And I'm not sure if that was any use to them or not, but it sure would have been funny, right?
I mean, it would be certainly shocking to see somebody do that, such that maybe it upsets like the army is like ready, just about to charge, and they're like, what the?
If nothing else, it would give you a laugh around the campfire.
But that was this is our Lip the Warrior is our kind
entertainment for the evening.
Our fireside jester.
Like it's like a little bit bizarre is what I'm saying. So I was playing with a little bit bizarre,
I think it definitely qualifies. Yeah. Okay, so we have one more question out there, and I just want to say I've put up the banners, you guys. Now is the time. Put your names into the comment section right now so that I can enter them onto the wheel of win here, and we'll take this last question. And when Maria is done answering, then we will spin the wheel for a free copy of the book. And let me find this last question. It was from Newt, I think. Here we go. We got a little Italian there on us there, Newt. Your familia. Yes. Is influences clear? What other influences from other authors or creators have you drawn inspiration?
That's a really good question. I'm a big reader, like I love to read. And from the get-go, my all-time favorite, book, novel, influence, I guess, is T.H. White, The Once and Future King. Absolutely. Oh. And also Tolkien, of course, like a nod to the masters. And George R.R. Martin, obviously, lately, and things like that. But I also, I read pretty voraciously, right? So Leigh Bardugo is another one I quite like. There's a lot. And actually, I put, just if it's of any interest, I put a further reading list in the back of the books.
Oh, cool.
The books, actually, they have a character list with pronunciation guide because I wanted to use the Welsh, but I wanted people to know how to pronounce that if they were interested. Yeah. And sometimes when you're reading fantasy, sometimes when you're reading fantasy, you just kind of skip the names, right? But if it's of interest, the pronunciation of the names are all in there. And also I put in a map so that you'd know whereabouts we were, and a glossary so that there's some terms and some Welsh words that like Welsh castles and so on that you might not know about. And also a kind of a historical note to explain the history a little bit. And there's like a pretty extensive further reading list, a couple of pages of different books in the books that you're welcome to kind of, I guess I'm inviting people to read on their own and come up with their own stories, right? But the other thing I should mention is Sarah Woodbury's great series, the After Kilmary series, which is the alternative history version of this time period, which is great. And of course, I don't know, there's like the classics like Edith Pargeter, the Brothers of Gwynedd, and Sharon K. Penman, who wrote the Welsh Princes. Those are historical novels that are accurate history. This is fantasy, right? Very much. But yeah, those are my big influences. But there's a whole reading list in the back of some of the research that I found. If that's of interest to anybody, I'm hugely inviting people to take a look at that. And in fact, I have, if you join my mailing list, I do have, I have put those things together in a free giveaway book, which is just the read along guide, which people are welcome to, to download and use on their own, because I very much invite people to take a look at that history.
Okay, and so that is also what our Patreon giveaway is today.
Yeah.
So if you join our Patreon or our YouTube, I'm just going to go over this really quick with you guys. One, you will get extra entries. You can have a maximum of 3 entries per person for every drawing that we do here on the channel, not just today's drawing, but also, so it's kind of a guide is what we're giving away today on the Patreon. For all of our Patreon members, you will get a copy of it via Patreon, and it's a guide that kind of goes over some of the things the pronunciations and maps, and
it's got the map, and it's got the further
cool.
reading list, and it's got the historical note. I combined the 2 historical notes into that one so that people
Cool.
have everything at their fingertips. I also am putting out audiobooks of both of the books, so partly it's for that, so people can have that because that's not going to be obviously in the audiobook. Right. So, but if they want that information, it'll be there for them to use as well.
And then also a quick question: how would somebody join your reading list? Where would they go for that?
You can find the little diamond to join on my website, which is mariepowell.ca. So Marie Powell from Canada.ca. Yeah. And
also in the low bar as well. So mariepowell.ca. Okay, just your name. I'm just going to put it right here, POWELL.ca. That's a simple website. And you can just go there. We'll give this to everybody out there that's watching. And it is now time to do the drawing for today's book. And let me pull up the Wheel of Win here. I've got all the names. Do I see any more names out there in the comments? Let's see. Look real quick here. I have they've scrolled away now. Okay, I think I've got everybody. Okay, so now we will just go ahead, pull up the wheel, and give it a spin and see who wins today's free book. Hooray and huzzah! I assume you can see this. Great. Okay, that is perfect. Boink. Here we go. Elizabeth Hunt, congratulations. Nari, yes, thank you so much. You are today's winner. I will get you their information after the show so that you can send along the information. It was so close, Sharonda. I saw you out there also earlier, out there in the audience. It was really close for you. So next time, right? All right. Well, is there anything that you would like to say, Marie, before we let you go today?
I just hope that people, enjoy the books, and if you do, put a review out there somewhere so I can read it and find out what you thought of them, or let me know in some way. And if you join my mailing list, I'd be happy to, exchange. Like maybe you could send me an email or something and let me know what you think of the books, right? Because these are very near and dear to my heart. This is kind of you could say my heart project, right? So of all the books that I've written and will write, these ones are the closest to me personally, kind of. So anyway, so I hope people enjoy the books.
Yes, and thanks for sharing with us, being on the show. I do also like to always remind everybody too, speaking of reviews, if you do get the books, please leave the reviews, because it does help the indie authors quite a lot. So more than the regular authors that are, have all of the big media machine behind them. So this is, so the grassroots is good here. And have a wonderful Friday. It is the weekend. Today, means Sunday is our last handmade home shopping show for the foreseeable future. Right now, you guys, we had schedule changes and things here, and it just isn't tenable to keep doing that. But I am working on a new Sunday show to replace it with. So this Sunday, tune in, because it is the last episode, and maybe with some luck, we'll actually be able to bring it to you in a new live on location format. Future plans in the works. That said, we will see you all, and I think tonight I may actually be doing a little secret live reading too as well, late night live reading, so probably 10 o'clock or later, from my new book of fairy tales, Hungarian fairy tales. So I hope, so great. It will probably be for our YouTube members and patrons only. That's usually kind of how I do those ones. But I'm like, I really want to get into that book. And so maybe I'll sit down and just read live to the camera tonight. I like doing that sometimes. So, all right, guys, have a good one. Hit the like and subscribe, and we will hopefully see you all on Sunday. Thank you for being here today. Bye-bye. Yes. Bye-bye. Uh-oh. Wait, what's happening here? I'm pushing the wrong button all the time.
Hello, friends. This is Gone for Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the fairy family. Safe travels.